On June 11, 1880, Jeanette Rankin was born near Missoula, Montana, to schoolteacher Olive Rankin and wealthy mill owner John Rankin. She was the eldest of 6 kids and mostly spent her youth working on the ranch with them. During that time, she noted that women in her area worked just as much as the men did, but had no say in state affairs. After graduating in 1898, she went to the University of Montana and got a bachelor's degree in biology. She briefly pursued careers in dressmaking, furniture design, and teaching, but when her father died in 1904, she took up the job of taking care of her younger siblings. At the age of 27, she started working as a social worker and enrolled in schools to better get equipped to do that. She later moved to Seattle and got more involved with women's suffrage activism, which ultimately paid off as Washington became the 5th state to enfranchise women. That made her rise in the ranks in many suffrage organizations like the New York Women's Suffrage Party and the National American Women's Suffrage Association. She later ended up returning to Montana to try and get them to enfranchise women as well, doing it via grassroots activism, much like her previous work, but in a less populous state like Montana, she was able to build more of a profile. She even became the first woman to speak in front of the legislature in favor of women's suffrage, which inevitably paid off as Montana became the 7th state to give women the right to vote in 1914. 2 years later, Jeanette decided to take her activism to the next level and decided to run for Montana's at-large congressional district. Her campaign was managed by her brother Wellington, who was already a well-respected member of the Bullmoose Republicans. Jeanette campaigned as a progressive, supporting national women's suffrage, social welfare, and prohibition, all the while running a grassroots candidacy akin to her activism of yesteryear. How these older at-large congressional districts worked was that a certain amount of top vote-getters would be seated in Congress, and in Montana, it was the top 2 people who would get seated. And Jeanette managed to get second, thus she won one of the seats, becoming the first woman to be elected to Congress. The news of a woman becoming a member of Congress reached the entirety of the nation, and they responded in a really creepy manner, apparently sending Jeanette a bunch of marriage proposals through the mail. And Jeanette managed to remain in the headlines as almost immediately after taking her seat, she was faced with a very tough choice when Woodrow Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany. After 4 days of debate, Jeanette stated to her colleagues, "I wish to stand for my country, but I cannot vote for war," becoming one of 56 people to vote against the war. Unfortunately, she was the only one that wasn't blessed with a Y chromosome, thus turning her into a very easy target for everyone, including suffragettes, who said it was irresponsible for her to vote nay on a bill that was going to pass anyways. But she didn't let that put her down, and she basically moved forth, and basically continued her legislative work, focusing on issues like improving conditions for workers, most prominently by helping workers in the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, though of course, her main issue was not going to be ignored, and she opened up a congressional debate on enacting a women's suffrage amendment. However, it unfortunately failed in the Senate. That same year, in 1918, Montana decided that instead of an at-large district, they will instead go with 2 congressional districts, each electing someone via first-past-the-post. However, due to gerrymandering, these 2 districts became heavily Democratic-leaning. As such, instead of seeking re-election to the House, she decided to instead seek election to the Senate. But after losing the Republican nomination for the seat, she decided to continue running as a candidate for the National Party and got a close third. Kind of ironic that a party that was originally founded as a group of pro-war socialists instead decides to run a radical pacifist, but, things happen like this. 1 year after she left office, however, the women's suffrage movement was still moving forward, and that amendment that she pushed for during her term was reintroduced, and it actually managed to pass this time. Unfortunate that she wasn't in the House to actually pass it that time, though she still holds the title of the only woman to vote for women's suffrage. After leaving Congress, she became a field secretary for the National Consumers League and a lobbyist for various pacifist groups, speaking in favor of a child labor amendment and the Shepard-Towner Act. In 1924, she decided to move to Georgia and continue her lobbying, mostly staying in the background until 1937, when she started to testify in congressional committees to protest FDR's preparedness strategies for what would eventually become World War II. However, she made a very interesting discovery. Despite the fact that she had become a lobbyist, Congress didn't care what she had to say. Congress not caring what a lobbyist has to say? What topsy-turvy land is this? So in order to make sure that they were forced to listen to her, she decided to move back to Montana and run for Congress again. She mostly spent her election rebuilding the connections that she lost when she moved to Georgia, speaking at 52 out of the 56 high schools that were in District 1. That, combined with her brother's help, and the fact that her opponent was a literal fascist, she managed to win her seat back in Congress. And just like last time, she ended up being seated around the time that Congress was debating on getting involved with a world war. Now, up to this point, there was a very heated debate between the radical isolationists and the radical war hawks, but Pearl Harbor basically made everybody unified in agreement that we should probably get involved with World War II. That is, except for Rankin, who became the only member of Congress to vote against the declaration of war. Her reason being, as a woman, I can't go to war and I refuse to send anybody else. That extremely maverick position got people so mad that reporters chased her into a phone booth before security had to escort her to her office, where she got tons of angry calls and telegrams, one of which being from Wellington, who told her point blank, Montana is 100% against you. Even though most disagreed with her vote, she actually still managed to get some praise for her courage in doing so. I mean, think about it. She was literally the only member of Congress to vote against this resolution. And it's not like she did it for any malicious reason. I mean, if her predecessor was still in Congress, I'm pretty sure he would have voted no as well, but for a completely different reason. However, one thing was made very abundantly clear, that due to this vote, her political career was pretty much done. And she didn't even bother running for re-election, knowing that she would probably face a huge blowout. Afterwards, she basically faded away into obscurity, basically maintaining a private life, mostly traveling around the world. Her favorite place to travel to was India, where she would study Mahatma Gandhi. However, Rankin did manage to make a political comeback in the 1960s, where she again became involved in the anti-war movement, this time the Vietnam War. You see, a lot of anti-war activists actually cited Rankin as reasons why they were anti-war, and as such she was inspired by them to get back into activism. So it was just a big circular loop of inspiration, creating a massive coalition of women's rights and peace groups called the Jeanette Rankin Brigade, which would end up leading a march of 5,000 from Union Station to the Capitol building to deliver a peace petition to House Speaker John McCormack. It must have been a weird image to see an 87-year-old woman leading a bunch of 20-somethings. Apparently, that march actually led to a separate women's liberation protest, staging a, quote, burial of true womanhood at the Arlington National Cemetery to draw attention to the fact that a lot of women spend a lot of times as wives and mothers and do a lot of hard work that ends up killing them, but they don't really get any credit. Funnily enough, this new anti-war movement actually made a 92-year-old Jeanette Rankin contemplate running for the House of Representatives again to spread this anti-war message. But long-standing throat and heart ailments made it so that that was an impossibility, and unfortunately she succumbed to them on May 18th, 1973. There is one other aspect of Rankin that is worth discussing, and that is the debate on her sexual orientation. While there is nothing definitive, Jean is now in a group of figures in history that many people are starting to reconsider whether or not she was straight. For one thing, due to her activism in women's rights, she managed to be associated with a lot of LGBTQ people, and in fact formed incredibly close friendships with them. And due to the historical misnomer of great friendships in the past, many historians are now thinking, wait, is this really a friendship, or are we just being stupid? Because it's a common thing for historians to do, essentially just whitewash all the very obvious LGBTQ people and just say, oh, they were really good friends. And this also has another layer, because terms like gay or queer or bi or lesbian didn't really exist at the time. She also very notoriously didn't have a lover. Notice how I talked about all those proposals that she got, and never about one that actually was reciprocated. Maybe it wasn't just the fact that they were incredibly creepy that turned her off. She seems to fit the archetype of a closeted gay person. Oh, I'm too busy with work to look for a person to marry, and that kind of jazz. Again, nothing definitive, but the speculation isn't baseless. So yeah, that's the story of the first woman to be elected to Congress. A story so interesting that it was turned into a play/movie, and no, that is not a teaser for the next episode. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to notify when a future video comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, check out my articles in the Independent Political Report, or consider supporting me on Patreon.